Joining us now, Regina Mitchell. Regina is the president of Warren Fabricating and Machining, and they make Ohio steel sheets and plates. Regina, thanks for being with us today live in Cleveland.
Hi, good morning, John. Thanks for having me.
Look, Regina, a big part of Trump's movement nationally, and as you know, we were the first one to call this nomination 15 months ago, and a big part of this is the loss of American jobs and our manufacturing base being shipped all over the world in the quest for cheap slave labor to bring the cost of labor down at the expense of the American worker. Since NAFTA, Regina, we've lost 25,000 manufacturing companies in America. We've lost 5 million manufacturing jobs in America. Wages are down. In your position in Ohio, trying to survive with an American manufacturing plant, you've also got China dumping steel at under cost in order to drive our steel industry under. What is going on here, Regina?
Well, what we're feeling as manufacturers here in Ohio and throughout the United States is a complete abandonment by our current leadership, both in Congress and in, the administration. China has unprecedentedly dumped illegal steel on our shores for the last 10 years. I don't understand why it's taken so long for our government to. We've had anti-dumping laws in place for a decade, and it hasn't been until the last 3 months when our U.S. steel producing mills are in crisis have they started to enforce them. So our leadership in this country has abandoned the American steel worker, the American manufacturing worker. U.S. manufacturing is continuing into this recession, although our GDP and our economy nationally is growing at a snail's pace. Manufacturing continues to slide backwards.
Well, look, Regina, you nailed it. And this China dumping steel thing, we're also getting dumping from the Russians, but the big culprit is China. And so that our audience understands what's happening here. So what China does is they basically dump steel in the United States. They're selling it under their cost of production because they're a communist country, so they can just subsidize it, all right? So they sell it under production in order to get their production up at a loss. Now, people that need steel buy it because, look, this is a capitalist environment. They're in the business to make money, so they can buy steel cheaper from the Chinese than from the American-made companies. It isn't because they're more efficient. It's because they're selling it for underproduction. Because they're being subsidized by the government. And China's objective is to drive our steel manufacturing companies out of business because they can't compete. They lose money, drive them under, and then the U.S. becomes dependent on China for steel. I mean, this is the most outrageous thing. Nobody's talking about it. And we have laws in place that says anti-dumping, that basically we can put a 20, 25, 30, 35% tariff or higher on this stuff so that it meets the needs. And then we have the globalist network of funded politicians through the bundler donor bankster class that is lobbying not to do anything. Why? Because their companies are buying the cheap steel, right? They're getting the money. They're flowing that back into the lobbyists who are then funding the politicians' campaign based on driving American steel manufacturers into the turf and eliminating these jobs in their own country. I mean, have you ever seen such a thing, Regina, in your life?
I've never. And as a U.S. manufacturer, we're one step removed from the U.S. steel mills that are under siege with this steel import crisis. And you hit the nail exactly on the head. What is happening is you brought up NAFTA earlier, and I understand the concept of free trade. And free trade in theory sounds really good. However, free trade only works when there's an even playing field, when the playing field is level. And the factors that are affecting us not being able to compete fairly globally, especially in the industrial markets that I work with, is number one, currency manipulation by China isn't being addressed by our government. The U.S. dollar is so strong that the products that we manufacture and ship overseas, our sales have stalled 30% this year because it's cheaper to buy those goods now in China, who steel companies and manufacturing companies that I'm competing with are being subsidized by the Chinese government. So 90% of steel producers in China are state-owned, meaning the government controls the price, controls the wage, controls the excessive steel production. Just to put this in perspective for you, the United States produces around 100 metric tons of steel annually. China has an excess amount of steel. 425 metric tons have been flooded into the U.S. from China. Why hasn't our leadership stopped this a long time ago, before our U.S. manufacturing and U.S. steel mills have been under this crushing pressure for too long?
The answer to that, Regina, and that's why Trump is going to win in November. It doesn't matter what your political affiliation is, liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, Independent. It really doesn't matter, because this is about jobs for Americans in America, and they're getting sold out by their political leaders, Regina, who are on the take from the bankster, donor, globalist, slave trade class that is simply looking for cheap goods and cheap labor. And so what happens is, why haven't they done anything? Why have they allowed China to dump almost 4.5 times the steel that our manufacturers make in order to drive them under? Because those people that are buying the cheap steel, Regina, instead of buying it from your company, okay, those that are buying the cheap subsidized dumped steel save money at the expense of the American steel manufacturing industry and the American steel worker. They save money. They take that money. They give it back to these politicians, both sides of the aisle, both sides, Regina, who are bought, sold, and paid for. They dump those into their super PACs, into their funds, to get them reelected to look the other way. That is exactly what's happening. That's why this whole government and the whole system is so corrupt, at the expense of America's manufacturers and working men and women. And until we change it and put somebody in there like Donald Trump who understands this, okay? Regina, look, in May, we had a $60 billion trade deficit. You annualize that, Regina, that's $720 billion. That's 4% of our GDP wiped out by purchases of foreign-made rather than U.S.-made goods, and in China's case, subsidized by a communist government. How does this make any sense, Regina?
It doesn't make any sense, and it's impossible for us to compete under those conditions. What we need to do is put America first and foremost, and I believe Donald Trump is going to do that for this country. We need to put our personal and political differences aside and work together to put America first and make America great again. It's time as a party to unite behind Trump, regardless of who your favorite candidate was in the primaries. I am convinced that Trump will protect American workers and grow the American economy. There's no doubt in my mind about that. Here in Ohio, we've lost 1,500 steel-related jobs, and nationally 15,000, and that's just been since the beginning of 2015. One thing that I've been encouraged by is to see Ohio senators, both Democrats and Republicans, Sherrod Brown and Rob Portman, have joined forces together to protect Ohio workers. They have introduced a bill into Congress called Leveling the Playing Field, and all they're asking is that we protect American steel companies and American manufacturers by enforcing the trade laws that we already have on the books. I'm encouraged to see them working together to put America first, and we need to now start doing this on a national level.
You know, absolutely. We're with Regina Mitchell. She's president of Warren Fabricating and Machining. They produce in Ohio, and they produce steel sheets and plates. And Regina, I really want to thank you for this. And I know you're struggling to make ends meet, and you're fighting your own government. I mean, it's incredible that you're fighting your own government to save your own jobs in your own state for your own people, for your own production. It's crazy what is going on here. And look, as I said earlier, American jobs are at stake, American manufacturing at stake. This dumping steel, this also, beyond just jobs for the U.S., this is a security issue because the Chinese plan is to make us dependent on Chinese steel when all of our steel manufacturing companies go under. And then we have to buy their steel. Then they start raising the price, and now we're dependent on them. And we fall right into it. Why? Because our politicians are corrupt and the whole system is rigged and they're bought and sold. That's the problem, Regina, and I appreciate your bringing attention to this. 1,500 jobs in Ohio in the steel industry since 2015, gone, 15,000 nationally. Hopefully we can get together on this. And Regina, as you said, this is not a partisan issue. That's when I hear speeches by Ted Cruz last night not endorsing Trump. It's like they don't get it. This is not a part of, Trump isn't conservative enough. If you don't have a job and Trump is going to save your job, that's about as damn conservative as you're going to get from anybody. And it doesn't matter who you're for. You want your job back.
It's common sense. It's no nonsense. I cannot understand why our party can't get behind this man. There is a revolution going on right now. The people are coming out of their living rooms and they're going to the voting booths this year. Thank goodness. We need a drastic change in leadership in this country just to protect American workers. My father started our business over 50 years ago when he came out of the Marine Corps. He started this business with nothing. I have been blessed to watch the American dream come to fruition for him, and I have been blessed to take over the leadership of this company, and I am grateful for that. But my father always taught me, you get up, you work hard, you play by the rules, and your country will protect you. Your state will support you. And the last 8 years, I have not felt any kind of support or encouragement from my very own country. I'm fighting day and night to keep as many employees in my Northeast Ohio community working, and I'm fighting a losing battle every single day. We need the support of this country to back the American worker. I have the best and brightest Americans working for me, and it is my duty and job to protect their wages, give them decent health care, and I can't do that under the pressures that we're feeling now in American manufacturing. We need a resurgence in this sector, and we need someone like Donald Trump to make that happen.
Regina, you keep fighting. Thanks for sharing this with us today. I know your company is under siege, and you're doing everything that you can in order to save your company and your jobs, and you're fighting your own government, and it's just unbelievable. But you're right. There is a movement. It's happening, and look, we're out there. You got people like me out there fighting for you every day, so hang in there. I'm out of time for this segment. It. All right, I want to thank Regina Mitchell, president of Warren Fabricating and Machining. You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network. We're live in Cleveland, the site of America's real political revolution. I'll be right back.